This is CS124, Lesson 2.6, Files. In order to get through today's lesson, be sure you understand how to use a loop to solve complicated problems. This video will go over reading and writing to and from files. All data created and stored when a program runs is lost when the program terminates. In order to have data saved after the program runs, we need to be able to save that data in a file. Writing data to a file is similar in some ways to writing to a screen. Conversely, writing from a file is similar to reading from user input. One key difference, however, is that files are finite and have a definite ending. User input, however, can go on forever, assuming your user is very patient. Writing to a file requires a series of special commands. First, include the fstream library. The fstream library contains all the functions to read and write to a file. Second, you need to declare a stream variable. This gives our output stream a usable name. This requires the command ofstream followed by a variable name. In our example, the outstream is named fout. Next, we need to open our output stream. We use our outstream name, fout, followed by the .open command. The name of the file you are writing to is contained in the double quotes within the parentheses. Now we can write to the file. This is done using the stream name, fout, followed by the insertion operator, then the text you wish to write. Notice that this is done just like cout. Finally, we close the stream by calling the close function. A stream variable is just that, a variable. Like any other variable, you can call your stream anything you like. A good standard is to use fout. The only difference between fout and cout is that the F in fout stands for file, while the C in cout stands for console. It's sometimes useful to have multiple file streams open if you need to read or write from or to multiple files. You can open a file one of two ways. You can hard-code a file name in, or you can get a file name from the user. Now we must consider a problem. What if the file you are reading from is full? Or what if the file you're writing to you do not have permission to access? In these cases, you must present the user with an error. In order to know if we get an error while writing to the file, you can use the command fout.fail. This tells us if writing to the file will fail. If the write file fails, you don't want to continue trying to write the file, so we simply return false and end the function. If the write file does not fail, we return true because we succeeded in writing to the file. We're going to take a moment to practice writing to a file. The first thing we need to do is include our fstream. Now that we have that, we can get ready to write to a file. We'll start by opening and declaring our outstream. We can do this in one step. We use the command ofstream for outFileStream, name our variable, we're using fout, and then we're going to name the file we want to write to. In this case, we're going to write to myfile.txt. Then we need to write to the file. I'm simply going to put a little bit of text. And that's what will be written in our file. Then we need to close our file. Alright, it looks like our file was written. Let's open our file to see what it has in it. We wrote this text to the file, and that's what went into our file. We could also make what we write to our file a little more complicated. If we wanted to output the numbers from 1 to 10, we would just have to do a loop. So if we run our program now, and then open our file, we'll see that the numbers from 0 to 10 were output. So just as you cout to a screen, you can fout to a screen, as long as you use the correct command. When reading from a file, we must once again include the fstream library. The stream variable needs to be declared using the command ifstream for input file stream. Typically, the name fin is used because it's similar to cin. Next, we check for errors from the file. When reading from the file, we use the extraction operator, just like you would with cin. As always, the file must be closed once we are finished with it. Once we've done these things, we can think about reading in our data from the file. As previously mentioned, a file is finite, and we must stop reading in when we reach the end of the file. It's simple enough to check for the end of the file by using the EOF function. Usually, you want to put this into a conditional statement like this. That way, if it is the end of the file, you stop looking for data. Now we're going to look at another example, this time where we'll practice reading from a file. First off, we need to get a file name from the user. We'll continue through this loop as long as we are unable to read the file name. So if they give us a valid file name that we are able to read, we'll break out of the loop. You'll notice that this is actually a function call. The problem is we don't have a function to match it yet, so let's take a moment to create that. You'll notice that we've set this up to be a Boolean. That way, if the file fails to read, we'll return false, and we'll continue to ask for a file name until the file succeeds in reading. In order to find out if the file fails to read, we need to ask if the file fails. Let's start by opening our file. We're going to call our stream fn. And in this case, we're going to be opening the file name given to us by the user. Now we're going to use the command if fn.fail. This will tell us if reading in from the file failed, and if this is the case, we want to return false and tell the user what the problem was. Now that we have our special condition set up, we can start actually reading in the file. The file we have set up has a user's name and their age, and it looks like this. So we have the name and the age. So we need to prepare our function to receive that kind of information. So first we need to create variables to hold the data. Now we'll actually read in from the file. First comes their username, and then a space, then their age. Once again, it's a good idea to check here if our read-in failed. And if it does fail, we need to return false and tell the user what happened. Now, assuming we didn't return false, we want to know what information we got from the file. So let's find out. And now that we're finished, we need to close our file. And if we got all the way to this step, then we will return true because we were able to read the file. You'll notice we still need to pound include our fstream, or we're going to run into some errors. Alright, now let's try to compile our program. So first we're going to give them an invalid file name. As expected, it told us it was unable to open that file. Now I'm going to enter a file name that has data that shouldn't be readable. This time we got an error that said we were unable to read the data from myfile.txt, which means that the data wasn't in the format we expected. Now I will give it a valid file that has the data in the format that our program is expecting. So we read in the user's name from the file, Sue, and got that her age was 19. What if we wanted to read in more than one name from the file? We'll just quickly change what's in our file. Let's add Joe, who is 14. We'll need to add a loop here. And we're going to go until it's the end of the file. So while it's not the end of file, we'll continue to do this process. So this time we got Sue, who was 19 years old. Then we also read in Joe, who was 14 years old.